Okay, here we are at 2012 PAT. Let's go through some more answers. Question number one. When the living conditions in a habitat change rapidly, the organisms that are most likely to become extirpated are, so extirpated again being essentially like extinct, but just from an area, so they will not survive. So when things change rapidly, we have the answer specialists that occupy a narrow niche will most likely become extirpated. So if we have look at our choice, we have generalist or specialist. So a generalist would be like a raccoon, something that can survive on many different types of food. Um, right? They are more flexible in their niche. And then they would tend to have a broader niche because of that. Specialists, though, who maybe can only survive on a very particular type of food or in a particular type of environment, they would also typically have a narrow niche because of that. They kind of goes hand in hand. So it would be specialists who occupy a narrow niche will have harder time adapting to changes. So, for example, if there's a fire and a certain amount of certain trees burn down, and there are animals that can only live in those trees, but those trees, they are now no longer to survive in that area. Dairy farmers have bred dairy cattle over many generations in order to increase the volume of milk that each cow can produce. That is artificial selection, again, selecting for specific traits. Okay, next one. A female cat with white fur and a male cat with black fur produce 3 black kittens. White fur color is either dominant or recessive in cats. And if the 2 cats described above had a 4th kitten, it would be black or it would be gray. Those are our options. So if you guys remember the idea of the dominant and recessive genes, so if we have we had learned that white cats had recessive genes, white cat fur, and black fur was a dominant gene. So in the presence of a dominant gene, that's going to take precedence. So white fur color, and we saw an example like that in class, but even if we hadn't, we can kind of assume that the white fur color is recessive because when combined with a black cat, the cats came out all black. And if they had another kitten, it would most likely, they should add the words, it would most likely be black. Because there is a condition where a cats could come out white, but and maybe we could have a quick look at that. So let's say so we're going to say we've got black, and we'll use a capital B to say that that is the dominant gene. So in this example, we're assuming that the male cat is has 2 uh, dominant genes, the black gene, and the mother could have say 2 recessive, and I'm gonna put little w's, okay, because she's recessive. So when they combine, they could have there are 4 possibilities. They could have, because when their cells split, right, and when they split the gametes, the genes split, and so you get these different options. Well, if there's only one option for the male, we would have, when his genes split, they'll be black, and hers would split and be white, and because black is dominant, well, that's why we got black. And on the other case, if he has both of the black dominant genes, when the other option is still black and her other option is still white, or the other cat's option is still white, So that's why they're going to get black kittens, and they would always get black kittens. So now that's okay. Explain this. So that's, I should redo this. It's not really that, you don't necessarily need to know it in this detail for this. We can kind of just understand that they've had 3 black kittens already, so that is going to tell us the next one should be black. But let me redo this again. So I'm going to say he's got the 2 and she has the 2 recessive. So there's, do it this way, these 4 possibilities. So with the first gene we get black, and let's say with her first gene we get white. Okay, if this first black gene also combines with the other one, we would still get black and white. And then if this one combines with this gene, we would get the same thing. And if that same black gene combined with this white gene, we would also get black and small white. And these would all give us a result of black because we have the dominant being black. So 100% of the kittens would be black. And so they're just basically saying if we've already gotten 3 black kittens, that's kind of telling us it's more than 50% at least so far. So we can assume that this male has both of these black genes, and the female has she could have no, if she's gotten white, she had both the recessive genes, so she has to be both white and white. Another option could be that the male, the black cat, he has a black and white gene, but he came out black because the black is dominant. And then the female is white only because she had the white recessive genes, both of them. So in one case, we've got this gene, black, combines with this white gene. And then we can have also this black gene then combines with the other white gene. So you get black and white, which will turn out to be black. We could also have this recessive gene meet with this white gene. So he would have the white gene and it would meet with this one white. So we have 2 whites. We could also have the case where this white gene meets with the other white gene, so white and white. So in this case, we would have a black kitten here, black kitten here, and 2 white kittens here. So it would be 50-50. So now, just because they could, luck could have it though that they have 3 black kittens in a row. But on average, they would be 50-50. So maybe a question if they said they had 2 black cats and then a white one, that would be a different situation, right? But even though with the 3 black cats in a row, we could potentially have a white kitten still. But we're just assuming that if the first 3 came out black, it's because we have this situation where the male has all dominant genes, both dominant genes. And that's always going to produce black kittens. Okay. All right, so answer to that was recessive and black. Use the following information to answer question 4. So we're talking about these different stages here: adult, sex cell, zygote, embryo. One of the stages in which cells contain the normal number of chromosomes is labeled. So it says one of the stages. So there could be many stages. And the stage in which cells contain only half the normal cells of chromosomes is labeled. And notice this one says the stage, because there is only one stage, and that's the sex cells have half the chromosomes. So we know our answer for number 2 has to be sex cells. So as soon as you find this, there is no other option here with sex cells. So this should be the right one. And then this honestly could be anything. We could say adult, zygote, embryo. At any of these stages, they all have the normal amount of cells, right? So because here we have, say, if this is humans, we're talking about 23 chromosomes, and as soon as they combine, they're back to the typical 46, right? Okay. All right, next question. Genetically important components. So it's talking about something describing these. We've got 1, 2, 3 different things we're talking about. One says a small segment located at a particular location determines a specific, so we're talking about genetic things, determines a specific characteristic on an organism. And our options to choose from to match up are DNA, genes, and chromosomes. The next one says defects in this component can cause observable effects on organisms. Most human cells contain 23 pairs, so 46 chromosomes, 23 pairs. Inherited material responsible for variation can be used as a genetic fingerprint. So genetic fingerprint, that sounds like DNA. And 23 pairs, we know we're talking about chromosomes. And so maybe if we weren't sure about this one, we could figure that one out now. But genes are a part of a chromosome. So without kind of, say here's a chromosome, it's got all kinds of like genetic information in it. Maybe there's just a little part of that codes a specific trait like eye color. Okay, determines eye color. So that is that small part of the chromosome, that's a gene. So there we go. Genes is, why did I cross out that? Not sure why I did that. We're just saying that option was now chosen. And so the last one is genes. Okay, next up, we have a graph here. Take a minute, look at your graph first. We have population on the left side, high to low, and then time on the bottom in years, 1, 2, 3, all the way up to 10 years. And a legend here that tells us the dark line are bats and the dotted line is our mosquitoes. So it asks, if the population of the predator species is reduced due to an illness because they got sick, then the population of its prey species will likely, so remember, a predator is the one that eats the other animal, the prey is the one that's being eaten. So who is the predator in this case? The bats, right? The mosquitoes are the prey. So we know that the solid line here we're looking at, that's bats, and the dotted line are mosquitoes. Okay, so what is it saying here? So it says, if the population of the predator species is reduced due to an illness. So if there's fewer predators, what do you think is going to happen to the prey? Honestly, independent of this graph, we don't really need the graph to understand this. But it says it will, so the population of the prey species will likely increase, right? So the mosquitoes will increase because predation will decrease. Predation is what predators do. That means they're hunting and eating those animals. Because if there's less bats, predation will decrease, less hunting of mosquitoes, so therefore they will increase. Now we could also kind of see that from the graph though too, right? So like if we look at this time here in years at year 1, when bats are low, mosquitoes are low but a little bit higher, and as time goes on, we can see that mosquitoes are starting to increase behind the bats. The bats are increasing too because as there's more mosquitoes, there are more bats. There's more mosquitoes, more bats can be fed. And as the mosquitoes increase in population, so do the bats. And it gets to a peak here where there are so many mosquitoes and there's so many bats, and eventually the mosquito population starts to decline. And then as the mosquito population starts to decline, so does the bat population because it now has less food. So it's kind of like this cycle that goes up and down. They eat so many mosquitoes that there aren't any, then the bats decline. Then the mosquitoes come back, then the bats start to come back. But even if we didn't have this graph, that's just something we can understand. We don't need to, in this particular situation, analyze this graph so much because it's just basics that when the predators die off for some reason, that the prey is going to increase. Now, of course, our other option here in this question was increase because competition will decrease. But what competition are we talking about? It's the bats are yeah, just it makes more sense to say D. Predation will decrease, which uh will allow more mosquitoes to survive. Now, if the mosquitoes are competing for, I don't know, whatever their food source is, or or for like still waters to breed in, um, that would be talking about them competing for the resources they need. But in this case, we're talking about how the bat and mosquito relationship works. So that's why we would choose this one. Okay, Shara takes cuttings from her red geranium plants every year and uses them to produce more geranium plants. So you have this flower, geranium. Okay, it's got branches, other flowers, lots of leaves and branches. It can be a whole great big plant. She takes a cutting, so if she cuts one of these branches off and then sticks that into some water, eventually it will grow roots, and then she can stick it after in some dirt, and she will have a brand new plant growing. So she's taking cuttings, and it says, which of the following statements are most likely to describe one advantage of Shara's gardening practice? And that would be C, it would take a short period of time to reproduce many plants. Because she could take, as long as she doesn't take too many, she could take more of these cuttings, stick them in the ground, stick them in some water, let the roots grow, plant them, and now she's got many plants very quickly. But in order to get to this question, we kind of have to look at the other answers too and see if they make sense or don't make sense. So it's not always just looking for the right answer, but seeing which ones don't fit. So the one says the plants produced would be a variety of colors. Well, no, because a cutting is just reproducing this, it's cloning this plant, right? We're not getting any variation. We would get variation if we had little bumblebees going here and getting pollen and then bringing it over to that plant, to the other flower, because these plants could reproduce that way as well. They can reproduce by sexual reproduction, which is what would be happening here with the bee, and then they would get variation, but she's not doing that. She's just cutting a piece of the plant and regrowing it, so it's going to be the exact same plant. B, if conditions change, most of the plants would survive. So that's not necessarily true. So if there's a condition that changed that's not beneficial to this particular plant, or that these all have the exact same genetics, so they're gonna be susceptible to the same problem, right? So that we can't say that that is most likely. And then D, there would be a genetic variation among the individual plants. Well, that's just definitely not. That happens with with sexual reproduction if Mr. Bumblebee comes along and pollinates these flowers. Okay, so yeah, so the only one that's right is C. It would take a short period of time for her to get new plants. Okay, question number 7. Land-based ecosystems tend to have more blank species than blank species, and the number of different species tends to blank the farther the ecosystem is from the equator. So let's look at our options. So our first choice is to say that land-based systems tend to have more mammals species than insects, or more insects than mammals. So when we think of the land, you might think of all the animals, bears and tigers and lions and giraffes, deer. Well, if we're thinking about Alberta, moose and deer and bears. But you may or may not be aware of just how many insects there are. So, like on the planet, there are mammal species into the thousands, I think. I don't know if it's 5,000 to 7,000 I looked up the other day. Let's say like up to 7,000 different mammal species. Could be more. Birds are a little bit higher than that. And then insects were an unreal amount. I think I don't have the tab open anymore, but we're talking about, I don't know if it was like hundreds of thousands or millions, but there's many different species of insects. So there are definitely more insects than mammals. And then this one, I think we all know pretty well. And the number of different species tends to what the farther this ecosystem is from the equator would be decreased. Because we know that there's more diversity around the equator. Okay. Warm, favorable conditions over the years have allowed many different species to survive and evolve in those areas, and to continue to survive and evolve in those areas. Next question. To control the rat population, British explorers introduced the Indian mongoose to the Fijian Islands. Not only do Indian mongooses prey on rats, but they also prey on Fiji's ground-dwelling birds. As a result, the status of these birds in some areas of Fiji has been affected as described below. 1. In the lowland regions of Fiji, some species of ground-dwelling birds are no longer found. 2. In the rainforest regions of Fiji, the number of ground-dwelling birds is declining rapidly. 3. In the remote mountain forests, several species of ground-dwelling birds are not preyed upon by mongooses. To measure the impact of the mongooses, scientists conducted a study of all ground-dwelling bird species in various regions over a 5-year period. So the question, the responding variable in this study is the responding variable, or the dependent variable, however you want to call it. Responding variable is, so first of all, what is the manipulated variable? The manipulated variable, or it's not really so much a manipulated variable, but it was the cause that was introduced was the mongooses, right? It was added to the population, but the manipulated variable, the thing that is changing because of that, would be the number of bird species present. Okay. Again, so a lot of information, and ends up being a pretty, you don't necessarily need to use every single piece of that information, but it paints a story and it just helps us. Our job on a question like this is to look at all that information and then just realize what they're actually asking us. Okay, so next up, segments of DNA are spliced together to produce rare proteins used in medicines. The process described above is an example of which of the following biotechnologies, and that's genetic engineering. Okay, that one's just something we just need to know. Molly has blonde hair, short legs, and can roll her tongue. She can also play the piano very well. Which of the following rows identifies examples of discrete variation and continuous variation? So remember, continuous is something that could have multiple values, like leg length, hair, like leg length, weight, like, stuff like that can vary. And then discrete variation are things that you either have or don't have. Okay, so let's look at our possible ones that we had here. Hair, color, legs, leg length, ability to roll her tongue. So I guess if your tongue is shaped a certain way, you can do that, and if it's not shaped that way, you can't. So that's an either, or that's an either I can or can't do it sort of answer. So ability to roll her tongue is something that you either just can or can't do. And that's, and let's look now. So that's definitely a discrete thing. Here they have leg length under discrete. Leg length is not discrete, it's continuous, so A is definitely out. Ability to play piano. Well, that's honestly more of a learned behavior, so it's not even really discrete or continuous. It's just that's a thing you acquire. Um, and then natural hair color. Yes, that could be a discrete one. Okay. Continuous. So our two options are going to be B and D. Leg length is definitely continuous. There are many different possibilities. People can have different leg lengths. It's not either you have leg length or you don't. We all have a leg length, but that could vary. And even if you say long legs versus short legs, well, within short legs, there's more than, it's not just a specific measurement. There's lots of different legs that could be considered short but have different measurements. And ability to play piano, well, that's neither discrete or continuous. That's just something that's a learned behavior again. So answer is B. Question number 11. The melting of ice is considered a physical change because the process is reversible. So that's something important to remember. Chemical reactions generally not reversible. We can't just like run them in reverse. Whereas physical changes like water melting can. So it's a state change. We have ice, and then it melts to water, and then it gets heated up further and it vaporizes into steam. It hasn't changed its chemical composition. It's still water. It's just here it's densely packed and not moving very much. Here it's loosely packed and moving somewhat, and here it's very loosely packed and is moving a lot, but it's still water, right? And then we could take that steam, condense it into a puddle if we lower the temperature, and then we could take that water and freeze it into ice. So that's a reversible process. So that's considered a physical change and not a chemical one. Following instrument. So let's use the following information to answer question 12. Here we have some H's and some O's. We can recognize these as water molecules. And what would be the title of this this diagram? I was gonna say piece of art, which I think they're kind of trying to paint this like an idea, like it's an artwork or something. But which of the following titles is appropriate for the diagram? Okay, never mind. Diagram. 1 atom of water, 3 atoms of water, 1 molecule of water, 3 molecules of water, and that answers 3 molecules. Hydrogen's an atom, oxygen's an atom, but water is a molecule. Okay, and we have 3 of them. H2O. All right. Okay. Let's take a pause here. I'll upload these questions.